the SEC cracking down or getting into investigations regarding ICOs and the like, as I mentioned in a prior video, the focus of these investigations tend to be either incidences where ICOs use it like a SAFT or called the ICO offering of securities, or try to like straddle the line, which I don't think is a very good idea as it relates to limiting U.S. investor participation to accredited investors only, right? So the question becomes like, how do you verify that, right? And there's a great deal of misunderstanding, I think, from a regulatory perspective in terms of like, can you actually verify accredited status in like blockchain transactions? And the answer is of course. It's not this like free for all where you never know who you're dealing with, right? And like you can very easily like handle that accreditation. But you know, the question becomes, what is that actual standard, right? And I think a lot of people don't know that. So if you're going to use a 506 type solicitation, right, like a general sort of the crowdfunding solicitation, as I like to call it, where you can openly solicit investors, self-certification, where the investor, you know, fills out something and says, I'm accredited, which the two main qualifiers are $200,000 income or $300,000 with a spouse, joint income for the prior 2 years with the expectation that will continue, or $1 million net worth exclusive of your primary residence, right? So that's like the primary qualifier for accredited status as an individual. And self-certification, again, is not enough, right? Like you cannot have somebody fill something out that says I'm accredited and, you know, take me at my word and, you know, I swear and affirm at the bottom and sign and say, oh, I'm accredited, and that's great. So if you're going to use 506, that's not sufficient. If, you know, 505, other things, that was sufficient or is sufficient. But for the open solicitation 506, it's not sufficient. So what are the standards? What do you have to do to verify accredited status of your investors that are coming in, right? And the SEC says you have to take reasonable steps. Well, what is reasonable steps? And that's kind of interpretive, but typically it means verification, right? And I espouse, you know, two-factor verification, meaning obtain two qualifiers or two, you know, third-party documents that would verify either income or net worth, right? And so typically that requires tax transcripts, right? Some type of W-2 or other incidents of you know, proof of income, right? And those are important because, one, you know, with respect to pulling a tax transcript, right, which you're getting from the SEC, don't necessarily get tax returns because those can't necessarily be verified. Have your investors complete a 4506T, or, you know, alternately use one of the services and actually pull the tax transcript, right? Because that's what's actually was filed, so you can verify that. Anybody can give you like what they purport to be their tax return, and that the onus falls back on you to verify the authenticity of those documents, right? Same with like a W-2, pay stubs, whatever the case may be. Those tend to be like third party created and they can be verifiable, especially W-2. So typically you have to rely on that. The net worth standard is a little bit more difficult, right? Typically you're going to have to rely on some kind of accountant prepared financial statement or similar to that. Now, there is an exception for correspondence from an attorney, a accountant, or a broker that can relate to the applicability of accredited status. So you can rely on those opinions if you're able to receive them from one of the three. But, you know, in general practice, what you'll want to do at a minimum, pull tax transcripts and then pull something recent, like as either W-2 or even pay stubs, to make sure that from the income verification standpoint, they're meeting the expectation element of it, right? Meaning like not only have they met the net income standards for the prior 2 years, but they expect to continue to meet that, right? Like, because, you know, obviously things change. So, you know, in that context, like with the SEC sort of coming down, it's really important. This seems to be kind of an area of like concern. You have to be able to point to the fact that you're actually taking affirmative steps to prove accredited standards. And if you're not able to, you know, prove accredited standard, then you can't take that investor, right? And this is in the context of the 506s, right? Like, and if you're not doing a security token offering, I don't believe that you should limit yourself to accredited investors, because it's like being half pregnant. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, I'm going to comply with part of the law that I'm saying I don't have to comply with, but I'm going to do it just to be safe. That doesn't make any sense. Don't do that. Don't do that. So, but, you know, there are instances where you're just going to do a 506, right? And you just have to limit it to accredited investors. And if that's the case, that's the standard, right? You have to take affirmative steps to verify that. There's some good services out there. We provide it, hint, hint. You know, so check us out if you have a question about it. But again, you know, 506, I don't think it's really the route to go in the crypto world, just because you would just rather do an equity deal. But, you know, I guess there's semantics about that. But check me out. Feel free to hit me up with any questions in the comments or my email below. I'm Tracy. I'll talk to you later. Bye.